Hey guys, Pete here. This is going to be my Game of Thrones Season 7, Episode 2 recap and review. If you haven't watched Episode 2 yet, you're going to want to stop watching this video because we're going to talk about everything that happened. Keep in mind, if you're new to my channel, I do a scene-by-scene breakdown first and then get into a discussion afterwards. If you don't want to watch the scene-by-scene, check the description. I put a timestamp link in there where you can skip straight to that discussion. Alright, so episode 2 opens with a storm for Daenerys Stormborn. Some pretty cool shots of Dragonstone there with the lightning going. And we hear Tyrion say, on a night like this, you were brought into the world, or you were born. Varys says that he remembers that storm. But pretty quickly, Daenerys redirects things. I mean, she says she doesn't feel like Dragonstone doesn't feel like home. I mean, she really doesn't have a home if you think about it, but yeah, she's not very happy. So Tyrion tells her that they won't be there for very long. And they look over the map there for a bit, and she mentions that there aren't many lions. Varys then steps in to say that Cersei only controls fewer than half of the 7 kingdoms. He says that the big families were plotting against them at the crown even before Daenerys came. It turns into this cool exchange between Dany and Varys. Varys is kind of blowing smoke up her ass on one level, but telling the truth on another, and Dany just sort of cuts to the chase. She basically lets him know she's not going to fall for any of that kind of stuff, and she calls him out on his past weaselry, but then instead of changing things around or whatever, he just stands behind what he did. This may be a different kind of Varys, like a hint towards Varys, really being on board this time, not only being out for himself. He says he came from nothing, and his true allegiance is to the people, not a king. Like he wasn't born in a powerful family. She kind of threatens him. They go back and forth. At the end, they end up at an understanding, which basically boils down to if she gets off base, if she's making the wrong decisions, she wants him to tell her, not to just basically go behind her back and just pick somebody else. And, he seems on board with this at the end. When they finish up, Grey Worm tells her that there's a red priestess from Asshai who has come to see her. They head straight over to the throne room where Melisandre is, and she speaks to her in Valyrian. Tells her that she was once a slave and that it's an honor to meet the breaker of chains. Dany says that the Red Priest helped to bring the peace to Meereen, so that means that Melisandre is definitely welcome there. Then she asks her name, and right away Varys brings up that she used to serve Stannis and that it didn't turn out very well for him, did it? To which Melisandre concedes. But Dany quips that, hey, you know what? You picked an auspicious day to arrive at Dragonstone since we've just decided to pardon those who served the wrong king. As she gives Varys a little look there. So Melisandre picks back up. She talks about the War for the Dawn and how only the prince that was promised can bring the dawn. Dany says, well, I'm not a prince. And Missandei interrupts and says, it's not actually the right translation. There's no gender in that word in Valyrian, so the right way to say it would be the prince or princess that was promised. This is more to Daenerys' liking, obviously, and Melisandre says she does believe that Dany has a role to play, but so does another. And she says that other is Jon Snow, the king in the north. At this point, Tyrion jumps in and says that he likes and trusts Jon Snow and that he is a great judge of character after all. And Melisandre tells Daenerys to summon him and let Jon Snow stand before you, have him tell you what he's seen. I find it really odd, like I found it odd in season 6 when Jon didn't bring it up himself, but when they're asking, she never says, oh yeah, he came back from the dead, I brought him back from the dead. But either way, we move on. She agrees and she tells Tyrion to send a raven north to tell Jon to come to his queen and to bend the knee. This isn't a big surprise. This is what we'd expect her to do. But at the same time, we can't really expect that Jon's going to do that. So that is a big point that's going to be a major obstacle going forward. We go back to Winterfell, and the Raven arrives in the very next scene. We see this shot that we saw in the SDCC trailer where they're training in the yard, young children, even girls, and we see that Sansa, Davos, and Jon are reading the message that's from Tyrion. They're suspicious. They pretty much think it's a trap, that it's too dangerous to meet. Sansa points out that he being Tyrion isn't like the other Lannisters though when Jon asks, and that he's always been kind to her, but that doesn't mean that they should trust him. Davos mentions the Dragonfire would work against the Whites, and I guess what happens altogether is they agree that what Tyrion said about Cersei on the throne is true. That is a bad scenario. But at this point, they still don't want him to go and be received by Queen Daenerys. We head over to King's Landing where Cersei is making her pitch that the Mad King's daughter is no different than him. She paints Daenerys' time in Essos in the worst possible light, and then she says that Elena Tyrell, who some of those people who are there are her bannermen, is in open rebellion to the crown. Randall Tarley steps forward and mentions the dragons, like she's coming with 3 full-grown dragons, which is what Aegon conquered Westeros with, and asks what's the plan for that. Then we get our first Qyburn sighting, and he steps up to say they're currently working on that. After they sort of break up, Jaime approaches the Tarleys as he kind of doesn't pay a whole lot of attention to Dickon, but then he goes with Randall and they have a little man-to-man conversation. He puffs him up a little bit. He says, you know, you're the only commander to have beaten Robert Baratheon in battle on the field. Not even Rhaegar Targaryen could do that. I mean, obviously Rhaegar failed at doing that, and that's where he died. Tarly makes the point that he's sworn an oath to House Tyrell, which Jaime rebuts, saying that you've also sworn an oath to the crown. But, you know, we see that he doesn't lightly switch his allegiance from the Tyrells. He mentions knowing the Queen of Thorns since they were young, and he doesn't look interested at all. Jaime does a little diplomacy. He says, look, I know you don't like my sister, but you basically have to make a choice. You either throw all in with the Tyrells or you back the crown. If you back the crown, you're going to get something good in return once it's all over. And then we can see that Randall kind of perks up a little bit. We don't get a resolution, though. Then we go see our favorite Tarly, or at least my favorite Tarly, Sam, and we see that Abros is examining Jorah. The Archmaester says that he let the grayscale go on too long, that he should have cut his arm off right away as soon as he was touched. We find out a little bit about grayscale here. He says he won't actually die for some time, like maybe 10 or 20 years he might live, but Jorah says, what about, and he says, your mind. We find out the mind goes in a matter of months, like maybe 6 months. Abros is pretty matter-of-fact about things. He says, look, if you were a commoner, I would send you away to Valyria with the Stone Men right now. You could live out your life there. But since you're a knight, I'll give you 1 more day. When he says that, he looks over at his sword, and Jorah does as well. So he's basically saying, look, if you want to kill yourself now and save yourself this whole madness and going to live with the Stone Men for the rest of your years, I'm not going to stop you, basically. You can do whatever you want to do. He leaves right away. Samwell's kind of behind. He asks about his family, and then he finds out he's a Mormont. I actually got a little chill whenever Jorah said Mormont to Sam, and Sam reacted. I'm not going to lie. But anyways, Ebros calls Sam, so they can't really get into anything. We cut back to King's Landing. We see that Cersei and Qyburn are walking down below. They're talking about the dragon skulls that used to adorn the throne room. He shows her Balerion's skull, which is gigantic, and he says, powerful, but not invincible. He tells Cersei that Daenerys' dragons were wounded in the fighting pits in Meereen, and that if they can be wounded, then they can be killed. Then he unveils the secret weapon that he's been working on and has her actually try it out. Like, he gets her behind it and says, hey, pull this lever. And I don't know about you guys, I don't know about anybody else really, but I actually caught some feelings about this. I wasn't an early supporter of the dragons, but I wasn't an early supporter at all. Like, I made a video about this a few months back, where I talked about why the dragons are actually cool, because I know people have problems with the idea when they first hear the story is about dragons or whatever, Either way, it hit me here. Like, whenever I saw her fire that into the bolt into the skull, we've seen Daenerys' dragons hatch and grow, and yeah, they're vicious beasts and everything, but I feel pretty attached to them at this point, so a little bit tough there. Back over at the map room at Dragonstone, we pick up on that conversation that we saw in the trailer. You know, I talked about this already. Yara's telling Dany, like, head straight over to King's Landing if you want to. You can basically take it in a day. Then we get Tyrion. We realize that, you know, basically everyone here is just interested in their, like, Yara, Olenna, Ellara Sand. Like, they're only worried about their revenge. Like, they want to get even. And we see that Tyrion's very useful here because he is level-headed. You know, he brings up the idea, hey, if you attack them with Dragonfire, yeah, you'll win, but you'll kill tens of thousands of innocent people when they attack. Ellara says, whatever, this is war, and they go back and forth where he, you know, says, hey, you killed Marcella, you know, I mean, she was totally innocent, and eventually Dany squashes it. Tyrion's quip about her being the Queen of Ashes hits home because she says, I didn't come here for that. So Tyrion lays out their plan, which is actually a quite better plan. They're going to have the city cut off. They're going to use the Tyrells who control the food, but also have a big army, and the Dornish soldiers from the south cut King's Landing off. And then they're going to send the Unsullied over to Casterly Rock to hit the Lannisters there instead. And everybody eventually gets on board. After that, Daenerys has a one-on-one with Olenna where she says, look, I know that you're here because you hate Cersei, not because you love me. But basically, I promise I'll take care of things. I'll make sure it's made right. And she says, you know, I want to bring the peace. Olenna does her whole spiel. The peace never lasts. Tyrion's clever, but I've known a lot of clever men and I outlived them all, so on and so forth. And she says to Daenerys, you're a dragon, so be a dragon. We find out that dagger sharpening scene that we saw over and over in the trailers was actually Grey Worm. He's getting ready to go out. Melisandre comes and, you know, we see that he was going to leave. That upsets her. He explains it. He never had fear. He never had any fear. He was never the biggest. He was never the strongest, but he never was afraid of anything. And now that he knows Melisandre, he fears losing her or not ever seeing her again. I mean, it's implied, but that's basically what it comes down to. And then they have a intimate encounter, I guess is the way you could describe it. It's a bit long, but it's touching, you know what I mean? It adds some gravity to those two characters. We like Grey Worm, we've liked him, but I think this kind of makes it a little bit more tragic if something happens to him. Melisandre, the same goes for Melisandre, except for, you know, she shouldn't be in any harm. Like I said, it didn't need to be as long as it was for me, but I think it was fine. I think it's derailed the story too much, and it was done well. We go back to the Citadel, and Sam asks Abros if he can cure Jorah, and he basically finds out that the method is too dangerous, and that's why it's forbidden. Sam goes anyways. He starts the procedure, which involves removing the infected layer of skin and putting a medicinal salve or something on. You know, I mean, he's basically going to cut off all the grayscale and then put some medicine all over him. It's important to remember, I guess, here that Abros said the reason why was the method that Sam's using, the guy who came up with it actually died of grayscale. So it's very gross, though. You're definitely feeling it for Jorah because he got some rum. That was about it. And he can't scream because nobody can know that they're in there. So Sam's basically flaying him. I mean, there's no real nice way to put it. We see that Arya meets up with Hot Pie, a little Hot Pie reunion. It's a little bit of a surprise. In my Arya video the other day after the photos came out, I didn't mention Hot Pie because we never really had confirmation that the actor was back. I mean, he did all indoor scenes, so we never had a chance to see him anywhere. So I didn't know for sure. Didn't want to get anybody's hopes up, but he is here. It's a good scene. It's nice. I mean, it calls back everything from the early part. It also establishes that he's a survivor, that he's doing okay. We see that Arya, she's sort of developed into this colder person, but also at the same time more able to take care of things. I mean, she's always been able to survive, obviously, but I feel like this is here so we can see just how much she's changed. Asked about Brienne, he says that, yeah, I saw her, and he doesn't mention the fact that it was in a trial by combat, basically, or, one-on-one combat with the Hound, where afterwards she left the Hound for dead, and that she basically ran away from Brienne because she didn't want to be with her. But most importantly, and I talked about this in my Arya video as well, that she finds out Jon's king in the north. And as I guessed, she changes her plans. And she doesn't even like hang out. Like she just changes her plans immediately and leaves. So I'm excited to see that. I mean, and we all knew that she was probably going to go north, but I'm glad there's no drawn out bit. It's good to see that no matter how much she's changed, her heart is still with her family at Winterfell. Jon gets the raven from Sam about the dragon glass. He brings it to the Great Hall. While he's there, he also tells them about the message from Tyrion. And we see Littlefinger perk up at this. But it's also, he's kind of like, he didn't really run this by Davos and Sansa. He's just basically rolling at this point. He mentions the dragons, which we said before or saw before in the trailers. Everyone sort of gets upset. I mean, which we kind of knew would happen from what we saw. Even Lyanna Mormont doesn't have his back on this one. She says, you can't go south. They need the King of the North in the north. But yeah, I mean, he shocks everyone, including Sansa, probably more Sansa than anything because she thought this was resolved. But he says he's going to meet with her. He accepted the invitation. They discussed it a little bit, like I just said, and everyone's against it, even Lyanna Mormont. But obviously everyone else because they just got behind this guy and now he's taking off. And he makes his points. It's not a terrible argument. I don't think he won anyone over, but he then puts Sansa in charge, and that seems to at least pacify the situation. And then he tells them that him and Davos are going tomorrow. They're leaving for White Harbor, and that's it. We see him at Ned's statue. We find out that Littlefinger is the one who delivered the bones, which was kind of a mystery. Say he did it out of respect for Catelyn. We see where the choke scene came from. We had seen this in the trailers. Basically, Littlefinger tries to get on his good side. He tries to say, hey, I'm a good guy. I like you. I want you to succeed more than anything. And I loved your mother and I love your sister. This is what sets him off. He basically chokes him, threatens him, and then him and Davos leave. Littlefinger looks butthurt, of course. We cut to the big reveal that everyone was waiting for, and that was Nymeria and her pack arriving. It was actually scary at first. There was all the different wolves descended, and they circled up, and it was pretty wild looking. And then we see that Nymeria... And, I mentioned this in my trailer breakdown that I didn't think that little wolf was Nymeria. And, man, I was right. Nymeria is huge. Arya recognizes her, though, and she recognizes Arya after a minute. And she says she's going home, and why don't you come with me? And Nymeria's not down. She doesn't want to. It's heart-wrenching at the time. Arya says, it's not you. And, on first here, you think she's sort of like being delusional or whatever. She's saying, oh, well, this is some other direwolf. But that's not what she's saying. She's saying it's not you and that you're not a house dog, basically. I mean, you've been out here, you survived, you built up this super pack, and, this is who you are now. Obviously, like everyone, I'm hoping that this won't be the last time we ever see Nymeria, although it very may well be. Maybe we'll hear word or something. I'm not happy about it, but I get it, I guess, At least they did it in a way that makes sense and in a way that there's resolution for Arya, I guess. Sort of knew it was going to happen this way, but it's still harsh. Anyways, we go on the ship. We see where the kiss came from that we kept seeing over and over again. Ellara is making a move on Yara and kind of messing with Theon at the same time. And then they come under attack. It's a full-scale battle. I mean, it's great visually. There's a lot going on. It's really put together well. Euron makes a crazy entrance. Like he comes down on one of those things that I can't think of the name of. But, he basically lowers himself onto the deck of the ship, crushes someone in the process, starts killing instantly. Theon and Yara spring into action. They start fighting. The Sand Snakes get the short end of the stick at the end of the day. Yara had sent Tyene downstairs to protect Ellara. The other two try to take on Euron, and he takes both of them out in pretty brutal fashion. They were pretty good scenes, but yeah, there's only one Sand Snake now, and her and Ellara are captured. Yara ends up captured, and Euron kind of calls Theon. He wants to kill Theon. So he's holding Yara and he calls him out, and there's all kind of stuff going on, and he basically reeks out. Like, he reverts back to his passive self that he was under Ramsay. He jumps overboard, and then we see him looking on at the fleet burning. We see that nothing's quite left. We know that Euron has collected his prize, his present for Cersei, the woman and one of her daughters that killed Cersei's daughter, which is pretty good if you think about it. Plus, he has Yara. So at that point, the episode ends. So if you skipped the scene by scene, welcome to the video. A lot of stuff happened. I enjoyed the episode, but I'm a freak. And, I was talking to some of my friends who, during the week, who watched the show, who liked the show, who were really excited about it coming back. But they were a little underwhelmed with the first episode. And I was trying to explain, they had to set the table. They had to get the pieces in place. And, my thought was, and what I told them is it'll pick up though, trust me. And like 2/3 of the way through this episode, I was like, oh man, they might lose some people after all this, and not the diehards, obviously, but some of the just show only kind of watchers who don't care as much about some of these internal things that we really enjoy seeing getting sorted out or whatever. But then they came pretty hardcore at the end with the battle at sea, and that I think it was impressive, let's be honest. I think that will bring everyone back to the forefront, and now that we only have 5 episodes left, we know from the trailers a lot of stuff that's going to happen, and it's going to be pretty high octane from here on out. The major points were Varys. Is Varys really that trustable all of a sudden? And one of the things that I thought about after the fact, I know that battle at sea had to happen and all, but does Varys have no little birds anymore or whatever? Like, he knows everything usually, and he knew nothing about Euron being a threat out there at the sea. So yeah, Varys is a little suspect right now. We'll see how that develops. I don't think he's against Daenerys in any way. I just thought they painted him in a really likable way in this episode that isn't that consistent with what we've seen before. The Arya stuff was big. It was definitely cool to see the hot pie cameo, I guess you would call it. She needed to get that information that Jon was up north. I was very excited that she didn't think twice about going there. Of course, we know he's leaving, but whatever, it's good to see that she's dropped that whole idea of going to King's Landing to try to kill Cersei. I hadn't thought about the fact that she might think that the Boltons still had control. So yeah, that's all really good. The Nymeria stuff was kind of a bummer. It was a great reunion, but I'm sure most of us wanted to see Nymeria at her side after that, and it doesn't look like it's in the cards. I was thinking too, Jon just left the north, or, he just left Winterfell. He's going south. We know he's going beyond the wall after that from the trailer, so we didn't see Ghost at all. So I hope we see him at least at some point in this season. But yeah, the Jon stuff was pretty telegraphed. We knew he was going to end up heading down there. There was such a heavy influence of Dragonglass in the first episode. And, as soon as we found out that Sam was going to be sending him a letter, we knew that in of itself would probably send him south. But obviously the dragons, Davos's little mention of the dragons and their flame versus the whites, I never bought it for a second that he was going to think about letting that go. You knew he was going to go. He just had to have the right moment to tell everyone he was going. The Sansa and Littlefinger table is set now. Littlefinger is going to move quickly while he has the chance. I still think Sansa is going to do the right thing, but we'll see how that drama kind of unfolds. The Olenna bit sends her back to Highgarden, which we've seen a lot of hints about a battle that's going to go down somewhere near there in a field. So she's moving in the right direction. Cersei, she improved her position. If nothing else, you have to say that she improved her position by her little meeting with Euron. Euron proved his worth as a captain. He just tore Yara and Theon apart. He claimed his gift, sent Theon overboard in a fashion that I don't think many of us expected. He didn't even try to fight. He just jumped. So that's a big development. It's not going to go over good with his men, of course. And where does he go now? He's basically a coward. He's been proven a coward. Melisandre is a very nice addition to the season. We weren't exactly sure how involved she would be. I mean, she had a child right before they filmed, but it looks like she has probably filmed quite a few scenes indoors. It's a little surprising that Daenerys just basically was like, okay, I'm down with this person, but not really if you think about the amount of time we have left and everything else. I mean, we don't have a lot of time for things to develop, like relationships to develop. What we didn't see was we did not see any Hound or Brotherhood without banners. We didn't see any Bran or any stuff at the wall. I'm kind of glad that we didn't get any Hound this time because I've been looking at some stuff about him and I wanted to put out a video. So yeah, I can do that this week since he didn't show up. But I also mentioned in the trailer breakdown that I put out right before this, we don't see any Hound or Bran in that either. I do expect that we'll see something from them. I mean, they're not just going to be gone for the rest of the season. So we might find out that that's all the Bran that we have at the wall. Like he'd basically just pass through and that he's been traveling, the Hound's been traveling, and the next time we see them, they're going to end up where they are. So yeah, I think it was solid overall. The trailer was definitely excited, so make sure you check out my trailer breakdown. Big things are going to happen in episode 3 for sure. Please like this video if you enjoyed it. Make sure to chime in the comments. Let's get a discussion going. I would do a Q&A as well if you ask questions, and there are some things that we need to look at. Please subscribe to my channel because I'm doing a full schedule of Game of Thrones all throughout the season, just like I did last year whenever they were doing the filming. Follow me on Twitter and my other social media accounts because that's the easiest way to interact with me, but definitely leave comments as well. All right, that's it. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you soon.